Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It is Season 4, Episode 40 on a Saturday edition of the podcast. We're talking Pittsburgh Steelers, Indianapolis Colts this week. But before we get into that, of course, we'll have a lot of different things Steelers-related to cover. But first things first, how you doing, Austin?
Doing good. How about you?
Not too bad. I mean, things could be better, but all things considered, it's a great day to be alive.
Of course, dude.
So, with the 5-2 Indianapolis Colts coming to town, it's going to be an interesting game. Certainly, the Colts are kind of flying under the radar at 5-2. What are your early thoughts on this game?
I do think the Colts are underrated for what they are. I mean, they were the first team to beat the Chiefs this year, and that was a big feat. I mean, I think people shut them down because they lost to Oakland early on, and they lost to Oakland big. But, I mean, still, I think that the Colts are underrated coming into this game, and I don't like that.
This is a well-coached and fundamentally sound team by all accounts. Nothing really blows your mind when you look at their stats. Nothing jumps off the page. But 5-2 is 5-2 after all.
Oh, yeah. They're a very good team. And like you said, fundamentally sound. They rank highly in penalties. They're third in the league with the least amount, third in the league with the least amount penalty yardage. And they don't really turn over the ball at all. They're really well disciplined.
This is a series that has swayed in the favor of the Steelers for most of its entire history. This will be the 31st meeting between the two teams. The Steelers have won all but 6 of them, if you include the playoffs. You might remember they played in 4 straight seasons from 2017 to 2017. The Steelers won all 4 of those games. The last one, the most recent one, is the only one that was really that close, it felt like. Jacoby Brissett actually did start that game for the Colts, but that was a game where the Steelers came out of the bye slowly, and the Colts jumped out to a 17-3 lead, including a long 60-yard touchdown pass to Dante Moncrief, which I remember pretty vividly. And that's where I didn't know much about Moncrief at the time, but I was like, oh, he must be a deep threat kind of guy because he sure toasted Artie Burns on that play, but who hasn't? And the Steelers ended up winning the game on a last-second field goal from Chris Boswell, and the Steelers rolled to a victory at the time. Just a fun fact about the Steelers and Colts history between the two teams. The Steelers have played the Colts 5 times in the playoffs and have won all 5 games. That's the most wins the Steelers have had against any team in the playoffs. The second most is there's a 4-way tie with 3 teams for 3 wins. One of them is the Broncos, one of them is the Raiders. I forget what the other 2 are, but regardless, the Colts are a team the Steelers historically have been better than and have won in a lot of head-to-head matchups, and in the playoffs they've swept them. So good history on the Steelers side going into this one. And some good news out of Steelers camp regarding Anthony Chickillo. Let's transition into that. He has been removed from the commissioner's exempt list and placed back on the active roster after the charges against him were dropped, as we mentioned in the last podcast. The Steelers have then in turn released linebacker Jaron Elliott. We will see if he circles back to the practice squad, but for now, Elliott continues to be that yo-yo man, and Chickillo I would have to think, will play meaningful snaps this week. We saw, as you had mentioned to me, that Ola Adeni did not play many snaps. In fact, he only played 4 snaps last week. So the Steelers, even though they were playing the Dolphins, they still went with a heavy usage of Bud Dupree and TJ Watt. So hopefully that will change with Chickillo returning to the lineup.
That would be nice. I mean, they probably overused TJ Watt in that game since he was still coming off an abdominal injury, and when you're twisting around the way he does when you're pass rushing, I thought that they should have given him a few more breaks, but hopefully Chickillo gets in a few more times to give these boys some rest.
Indeed. Another bit of Steelers news that came out yesterday, the Steelers were fined in total $100,000. The Steelers themselves, $75,000, and Mike Tomlin got $25,000 for failing to list quarterback Ben Roethlisberger on the Week 2 injury report. So those who are confused might remember that, of course, Roethlisberger injured his elbow and it ended up ending his season, but he had been dealing with elbow discomfort in the week prior to the game. The Steelers had not listed him on the injury report. He did have a Veterans Day off on Wednesday, but there was no designation of an elbow injury. So this is essentially just the NFL slapping the Steelers on the wrist for not updating the injury report properly.
It's surprising. Usually they don't break down on that, but I think we did talk about it when it happened. I think I might have said that I was surprised that the Steelers weren't going to get disciplined for this because he said that Mason Rudolph came out and said that the elbow was bothering him after the first game, and they didn't make any mention of it. So it just came and hit later than expected, I suppose.
The NFL's discipline process takes a long time, as we already know. And, this is something that I really think happens. It's more widespread, but when it happens to a big name like a Ben Roethlisberger, I think that's when the league decides to act for right or wrong.
Yeah, I think they like to make an example of the bigger people. You're right.
All right, let's look at the injury report for this week. Let's start with the Steelers, of course. James Conner, who was kind of up in the air with that AC joint injury he suffered late in the Monday night win over the Dolphins last week. It's looking not so good. He's listed as doubtful now, and I'm not sure exactly what is going to happen here because Benny Snell had to get surgery to clean up his knee. It's the same surgery that Ola Adeni had at the beginning of the year. It's that meniscus tear, so he should be out for about half a month to, at the most, a month. So with Snell gone, you've got Jalen Samuels coming back from injury, so that would just leave right now just Samuels coming back off the injury and Trey Edmonds as your only active, healthy running backs. So that being said, let's just assume that Connor can't play. Do the Steelers call up another running back, do you think? They would have to do it today.
I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to just roll with the two running backs they have and have emergency running backs in Roosevelt Nix and maybe Ryan Switzer, because Ryan Switzer has been back there before. And then you could always have the tight ends come into the backfield. We've seen Vance McDonald do that occasionally last year. I don't think we've seen it yet this year, but I think they're going to roll with two and not call anyone up. I mean, the two running backs they have, Darren Hall is newer. He just got signed within the week. And I forgot the other one.
Tony Brooks-James. He just got signed 2 weeks ago, not even. So both these guys have very limited experience with the team. I doubt the Steelers think that they'll be able to help on game day.
Exactly. I think it's just better to roll with the two you got. In an emergency, you bring back Ryan Switzer or someone back there.
Would you rather see James Conner active and kind of break glass in case of emergency type of guy in case one or both of the other guys go down, or would you rather see maybe Switzer in the backfield?
I think I'd rather see Switzer. I don't want James Conner to get even more hurt. He's kind of got an injury history going for him now. So I feel like it's just better to hold Conner out and just bring in Ryan Switzer in the emergency situation if it comes to that.
Normally, I would say in a game that's as critical as this one, I would want a player to play if there's, if they think they can play. But with Connor's injury history and the fact that it probably would not take much for him to re-aggravate it, I think it would be better to just, go with the Ryan Switzer route if you have to. And to be honest with you, I know we weren't big fans of it last year, but I'm kind of interested in giving it one more try just because of how little he has been used in the offense and how limited he has been. I don't know if he'll open things up, but I at least like that maybe you can give something else a try with him because, as we know, his limited route tree isn't doing him any favors.
And maybe you could get more versatility out of him. Maybe you could find a few plays where you're okay, maybe we can use him in the backfield and he won't be a detriment. Maybe for some trick plays and stuff like that.
I definitely wouldn't mind seeing I think it's called the pony package, where there's two running backs on the field, but essentially in the backfield you have both Switzer and either Samuels or Edmonds. I'd like to see that.
That'd be cool.
The only other injury that we need to discuss. Sorry, I forgot. There's two. One of them is Roosevelt Nix. He's still coming back off that knee injury. He did get hurt on Friday's practice and was limited that day. So not a great game from Nix. The tape will tell you going back to last week, but he did play a part in a couple of big runs for the Steelers. How are you feeling about Rosie? I mean, this is a game where we're shorthanded at the running back position, but he's also a very important player, and you don't want him re-aggravating something either.
Was rough because he wasn't on the injury report Wednesday or Thursday. It was rough to see him have a limited practice on Friday, but I mean, I think he will be good to go, and I think he should play in this game. Like you said, his last game wasn't that good. I mean, there were some plays that he was good on, like he made a big block on Connor's early long run, but if he could return to form and play like he did like before the injury. I think that would be helpful for the team when you're down without Connor right now. I think that would help Samuels out a little bit if Rosie Nix is there. So I hope Rosie Nix is playing.
I think this is a game where you could run a lot of heavier sets, and I'd like to see Nix on the field. So I probably rolled the dice with him here. One guy that looks like is not going to be going, in fact, and is out, is going to be Ramon Foster with that concussion. So I did read and I searched around. It was the final play of the Steelers' offense's first half where that Deontay Johnson long touchdown, that's where Ramon Foster got his concussion. I didn't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't actually see that at all. That's what happened on the play. Did he fall on the ground and hit his head, or did he bang his head against another helmet, or what?
It was tough to tell. I'm going to actually go back and rewatch the play right now, but I seem to remember it being kind of lost in the mess. I was trying to watch a replay, but regardless, B.J. Finney's getting the start at left guard. What are your thoughts on B.J.? Because we haven't seen him much the last few years. I mean, it feels like he always starts a game or two every year, and this is going to be that one.
I like B.J. Finney. I thought that it was time for him to be the starter quite a while ago, but I mean, the team decided to extend Ramon Foster, and I was happy with that as well. I mean, you really couldn't have gone wrong, but I mean, I think B.J. Finney is like a starting caliber guard, so I'm fine with this. Ramon Foster, but I feel like the drop off in my head is minimal here. I really like Finney. I think Finney's a good guard. If it was to Castro, I think there would be a bigger drop off, but I feel good about this. I feel fine. I think it's okay that Ramon Foster's going to be out a week or possibly two, as long as B.J. Finney doesn't get hurt.
Okay, so I'm watching the replay now. Foster is taking on a blitzer inside, and he kind of gets popped in the head as soon as the guy makes contact, and he immediately goes to the ground.
Oh, really? Wow, I didn't even remember seeing that. And he played the rest of the game, or what?
No. I remember B.J. Finney was out to start the second half.
I didn't even remember this. I must have not paid attention to the line, at all.
I just remember because Finney was the guy making the tapping Pouncey or just looking back or whatnot. So I do remember that Finney was in there. But, yeah, I mean, I like Finney. I'm not sure that I'm as high on him as you are, but he has played well in limited time. But I guess this is a conversation that we can probably have a good amount of times over the coming weeks and months. It's going to be difficult to keep both Ramon Foster and B.J. Finney going into next year. In fact, I'd say it'd be darn near impossible. So that being said, first of all, how do you feel about that situation? Where do you think the Steelers would lean? How would you lean in this one?
I think the Steelers kind of screwed themselves by signing Ramon Foster long term. I think you have to roll with Ramon Foster because they don't really have money to pay B.J. Finney. They already have Ramon Foster under contract. They're not going to be able to. I think Finney's going to get a pretty solid contract, sort of like Chris Hubbard did when he went to the Browns. So I just think that the Steelers don't have a choice here. I think they got to go with Ramon Foster, which is sort of unfortunate because B.J. Finney is the younger player, and Ramon Foster probably after this contract is done. But I can't see them being able to.
It is a cuttable contract, though.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
Foster's contract, it is something you can afford to cut at the end of the year, though.
But you still won't be able to afford to pay Finney, is what I'm saying. I think Finney's going to require more than that. I thought Ramon Foster took a little bit of a discount to stay with the Steelers. He is really not that expensive.
And you think Finney would cost more than that?
I think Finney's going to demand more on the market. like Chris Hubbard, I know it's a different position, so Chris Hubbard's going to be paid more since tackle is more required than guard. But I do think that Finney's going to get more when he hits the market.
So you think that he's going to make money similar to what someone like Chris Hubbard made?
No, not exactly there. Just more than Ramon Foster. Ramon Foster's on what, like I think a $4 million contract, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I just don't see how a guy who has 9 career starts over 4 seasons is going to be able to garner that much money. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that he can start for about 10 to 12 teams in this league at guard. But the difference is Chris Hubbard started 14 games over 2 seasons, and that's what got him his contract. B.J. Finney's never started more than 4 in a season.
Yeah, but
I think you can bring one back. But obviously, if you bring Finney back, you're cutting Foster, and you're saying that's it.
Yeah.
Where would you go? Like, who would you lean towards?
I want Finney. I'd prefer Finney at that point. I appreciate everything that Ramon Foster has done, but I mean, you either if you sign Finney, right, you might not have to draft a guard. If you don't sign Finney, you're going to have to draft a guard or get one in free agency that next year to replace Ramon Foster. Because, like I said, you can't have both at the same time.
And we already, I was gonna say, there's no way Ramon Foster's gonna take a pay cut. And besides, how much would you save? You wouldn't save much from it anyways.
Pretty cheap. Like $4 million isn't that expensive for a guard.
Well, it's definitely going to be a difficult decision, but I guess a good problem to have from the Steelers' perspective. Let's flip pages to the Indianapolis Colts. The biggest news for them is that they are going to be without their top wideout, T.Y. Hilton, with a calf injury, and he's expected to miss up to a month with this injury. If you include Devin Funchess, who's been out since week 1, the Colts are now without their top 2 wideouts, which means we're going to see a good amount of Zachary Pascal, Deion Kane, Chester Rogers at wide receiver. T.Y. Hilton, now granted, a lot of the Colts games in previous years have been played when Andrew Luck wasn't at quarterback or there were other injuries, but the Colts are 0-5 when T.Y. Hilton does not play.
And that's good news for the Steelers. I mean, this year it really feels like the Colts are depleted at wide receiver. Their wide receiver room behind T.Y. Hilton isn't that good. They don't have like that. I know this is going to sound weird to say now, but they don't have like Dante Moncrief behind him or just someone else to step up. They don't have like a clear-cut like wide receiver 2 on their roster. They have T.Y. Hilton, who's a wide receiver 1, and then they have a bunch of wide receiver 3s and 4s after that this year. This works out in the Steelers' favor for sure.
Paris Campbell is another name, a rookie from Ohio State that's been pretty quiet this year. I expect that we'll see a lot of the ground game, and we can talk about the tight ends in a little bit. But obviously a huge loss for the Colts, who are now down to their number 3 receiver to be their number 1. On the flip side, they've got several injuries on defense. We'll start with probably their best pass rusher in Justin Houston, the longtime Kansas City Chiefs edge rusher. He was limited on Thursday and didn't practice on Friday. This isn't a great pass rushing unit, but if you take him out of it, the only guy you have to really even think about worrying about is Jabal Sheard.
Yeah, Justin Houston accounts for more than a fourth of the Colts sacks this year. He has 5 on the year, and the Colts have 19 in total. So that would be a huge loss if he can't go. I don't really know what happened. I was trying to research it. I even went to the Colts injury report. It said I think he got hurt in practice, but they did the same thing with Malik Hooker. So I'm not sure because Wednesday there was nothing. He didn't have a designation. Everything was fine, and then Thursday he came in limited, and then Friday he did not participate. So I don't really know what's going on with him. If that was just if Wednesday he had a day off or something and didn't practice, and they just didn't list it and said nothing was there. I don't know. I hope he doesn't go. Is the point? He has 5 sacks on the year. Is easily the Colts' best pass rusher so far this year. And so losing him would be another big blow to them because that's one of their best defensive pieces they got.
Another starter for them that could be out and probably will be out is cornerback Pierre Desir, formerly of the Cleveland Browns. I'm sure Steelers fans are familiar with him. He's not a world beater, but the important thing to note is that behind him is a guy that a lot of people were thinking the Steelers might take in the first round this year, and that's Rock Ya-Sin from Temple. Now, he's been okay up until the last few weeks when he's had to play more. Listen if you've heard this before. Rock Ya-Sin has been flagged 7 times this year for holding illegal contact, defensive pass interference. All of them have come in the last 3 games.
Is that Artie Burns?
I mean,
with a Rock Ya-Sin?
Separated at birth, apparently.
Sounds familiar, yeah. But they're kind of like the same type of player, because I looked at Rock Ya-Sin coming out. Rock Ya-Sin was a developmental piece from Temple. He had all the like qualities you want. He was like tall. He had long extremities. He was a good developmental piece, and he had the speed. He wasn't the greatest, and Temple isn't one of like the greatest schools in the NCAA, so he wasn't playing with like the greatest cast around him. But he was a developmental pick, sort of like Artie Burns was a little bit higher than Artie Burns was taken, I believe. But yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Rock Ya-Sin.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he also play at a mid-major school early on in his collegiate career? I for some reason I seem to remember he only played like 1 or 2 years at Temple too.
He started I forget the school, but he did play at like a Division 2 or 3 school first.
So essentially, it sounds like the Colts would have preferred to take him a similar route to what the Steelers have done with Justin Lane and give him a redshirt year, but obviously that is not the case right now, and he's getting burned on it.
Oh, for sure.
So that's definitely something the Steelers should hopefully take advantage of. And then last but not least is free safety Malik Hooker. He's questionable with a knee injury, but he was just like Justin Houston. He was limited on Thursday and didn't practice on Friday. So the Colts could be missing 3 defensive starters here, and it's not, again, just like the entire Colts team, they're not a dominant unit, and they haven't been statistically great, but they've been solid. They've been efficient in the red zone, and this would be a huge loss because these are 3 of their better defensive players.
That would be a huge loss as well. I'm really hoping to not see Malik Hooker. I think that they could live with Justin Houston playing, but Malik Hooker's a really good safety. I think it'd be great if he didn't play.
All right, let's jump into the preview, I guess. Do you want to talk about the Colts offense or defense first?
Let's start with defense. I feel like we never start with defense.
Okay, so when you look at... So you mean the Steelers defense or the Colts defense?
Okay. Oh, we always start with the Steelers offense. Let's start with the Colts offense. I should have said it that way.
Okay, well, I mean, we've had a man crush on this guy for a while, Jacoby Brissett. A lot of people thought the walls were, the sky was falling, the walls were closing in when Jacoby Brissett had to take over for Andrew Luck, who retired in the 3rd week of the preseason, and he's taken over. Remember, he started 15 games just 2 years ago, and he's been pretty darn good. Dare I say an underrated dark horse, possibly MVP candidate? He's been very good, and I don't think that surprises either of us. Maybe not to being this great, but he's been certainly as good as they come.
He has been really good. He doesn't turn over the ball much, and I forget if it's still true, but he was leading the league in touchdowns after Mahomes got hurt. He's now at 14 touchdowns on the year with only 3 interceptions. He's been really effective with the ball. It's going to be rough for him to get like MVP votes and stuff because he's not flashy. He doesn't. His deep ball isn't crazy good. His yards per reception are only at 6.9. It's not like the longest yards per completion in the world, but he is still effective with the ball, and that's all that really matters. He's winning his team games, and he's doing well. He's filled in well for Andrew Luck, and like you said, we saw this coming. I've always liked Brissett, and even when he started against the Steelers a few years ago, it was a different team, and now his team's better. He's got an offensive line now. I mean, the wide receiver room is a little bit worse because it's just T.Y. Hilton now, but I mean, the team as a whole has gotten better around him besides that. So I really like Brissett this year, and I do think he could be a dark horse MVP. It's just he doesn't got the flashy numbers like Watson and Russell Wilson.
And that's exactly how I'd describe his play. He's not really flashy. He does everything pretty well. He does, like you said, he doesn't have an amazing arm. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he can buy time with his legs. He can make plays down the field occasionally. He does pretty much everything well. And the thing to note from 2 years ago compared to this year, like you said, it's not just personal improvement where he has more experience now. It's a better coaching staff. It's a better offensive line around him. Yeah, the receiver room isn't as good, but just about everything else is better now than it was when he was starting 2 years ago. So Brissett has been a much more grizzled veteran. He's performed well, and that's been reflected with the Colts record. But that being said, make no mistake about it, this offensive line and this offense, especially with the weakness at wide receiver right now, will be a running football team, and they've run mostly off the back of Marlon Mack, who has 590 yards on the year and 3 touchdowns. He's not a huge receiving threat, but they love to get their superstar left guard Quentin Nelson on the move. They've got another good center and Ryan Kelly, and a standout left tackle in Anthony Costanzo, who's been doing it for a long time. This will be a difficult test. One of the few times I feel like the Steelers' defensive front meets a very good match, and maybe even overmatched in certain areas by an offensive line.
Yeah, the Colts offensive line is no joke. I mean, Quentin Nelson was a surefire thing last year, and the Colts got him, and it was really good for him. He was an all-pro immediately in his first year, and it's just been amazing for them. And like you said, Ryan Kelly's a good center, and really the whole interior of their line is really good. The tackles are solid, and the whole line as a whole is an elite line. But I actually like the inner part of their line the most. And I think that's going to be the big matchup in this game is if they can run down the middle behind their center, behind their 2 guards there. I think the Steelers are going to have a tough matchup in this. I feel like Bud Dupree is going to struggle here because Bud Dupree has been really solid this year, but this is a real good offensive line, and I don't think he's going to be able to convert his speed into power here like he's actually done this year for the first time ever. It's just a little bit tougher to do here when you're up against an elite offensive line like the Colts here. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Steelers handle Marlon Mack and Jordan Wilkins and all those guys behind the Colts offensive line.
This will be the first game where you really miss Stephon Tuitt.
100%. You roots pass rushing and pressure on Brissett against a really good offensive line like this. It's going to be tough, but hopefully Isaiah Buggs or Tyson Alualu can step up, or even Trevon Hargrave when he's put out into that position. Someone else just got to step up with Cameron Hayward.
Now Hayward's going to be going up against Nelson. I think that'll be a matchup I'm going to be really excited to watch because they're two of the best in the business, and Hayward, although he might be physically outmatched at times, I think Hayward will still be able to win a couple times against Nelson too. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I think the guy who really needs to win his matchup, and I think if there is a weak link on this offensive line, it's going to be right tackle Braden Smith, which means it's going to be up to TJ Watt to get most of the pressure.
It is who you like that matchup though. You like TJ Watt going against the weakest one. I mean, there you could have some confidence in that if TJ Watt gets to go against the Colts' worst offensive lineman, worst of a great situation. I mean,
the only other potentially positive thing is that Jacoby Brissett will occasionally hang on to the ball longer, but again, he only has 11 sacks against this year, so it's not like it's killing him.
Not at all. He doesn't really. All those sacks are really from him. I mean, not all of them, of course, but he does hold on to the ball quite a few times, and even then, he's shifty. I don't know. Did you see his play against the Broncos last week? The one where he's in his own end zone and escapes the sack, and then runs to his right and completes a 30-yard pass down the field.
Was that out of an empty set, out of curiosity? I think it was.
I believe so, but I don't remember.
I think that just shows how much confidence the Colts have in him, that they're going to run an empty set from inside their own end zone. I just think that's fantastic.
Yeah, the Colts really believe in him, and they should. They really, really should.
Elsewhere, let's talk about their passing game. We already talked about Marlon Mack a little bit, but they have other running backs in Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines who are good pass catchers and shifty guys that can be extensions of the running game and the short passing game. But I think, as we know, with T.Y. Hilton being ruled out of this game, we're going to have to see a lot of the tight ends. There's Eric Ebron, who essentially functions as the tight end. I think it's 14.8 yards, 14.5 yards per catch. Only Jonnu Smith has a higher yards per catch among tight ends this year. So Eric Ebron almost functions as a tight end. And, of course, they have the ever-reliable Jack Doyle for underneath stuff. It's kind of like what we saw with Noah Fant and T.J. Hawkinson at Iowa, at least what I remember seeing. You've got two really good tight ends, and you got a handful of good running backs, but a weakness at wide receiver. So what do you think about this passing game? It's probably going to have to rely on the tight ends and running backs.
I was just going to echo that. I think for sure it's going to really rely on those tight ends because I feel like their running backs haven't been that good in the passing game. I feel like, because you look at Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack isn't really been a receiving running back, but he only has 11 receptions on the year for 6 to 8 yards. That doesn't exactly scare me. I know Nyheim Hines is a much better receiving back, but I think that they really need to rely on their tight ends here. I've always loved Jack Doyle. I think maybe on the podcast I said early on I wanted the Steelers to possibly trade for him, maybe try and trade Josh Dobbs to the Colts to give them a backup, but that obviously never came into fruition. So I really like him. He was injured for a little while. He got hit with by Vontaze Burfict, the one that got him suspended, and he was concussed from that. But Ebron's also been sneaky good. Not as much as last year. Ebron last year was another beast. I think he was playing just to say to Lions fans and the Lions that hey, I'm actually a good player. He still has the drop problem that he did in Detroit, which is not as bad. But he's still really good, and he actually for a little while probably had the catch of the year. He caught a really nice one-handed grab at the back of the end zone against the Texans this year. But so I am worried about him, especially with his speed. I'm hoping that he gets a case of the drops in this game, and that would help the Steelers out. Then you really just gotta watch for Jack Doyle. I think, like I said, Jack Doyle's a really good player. He's not really gonna go deep and beat you like Eric Ebron is. He's gonna be the underneath guy to take maybe take a 2-yard pass and get a 10-yard gain out of it. So you want to try and limit his yards after the catch, but I do think the passing game is going to run through those two, if I'm being honest.
I forgot the exact statistic, but I think since week 3, the Steelers had the best defense in terms of explosive plays allowed. And when you look at this offense top to bottom, it's not one that is built on getting a ton of big plays. And with that being the case, I like the Steelers' defense in this game. But, of course, that being said, Marlon Mack has broken a few long runs this year, including a 63-yard run. You can't give up the big play to this offense. If you can keep them hemmed in, they don't turn the ball over a lot, make them drive the length of the field, I think that'll put the Steelers in a favorable spot.
For sure. I think that if the Steelers can just limit those big plays, they didn't even give up a big play last week, and some may say that that's not significant, but even the Patriots gave up an explosive play against the Dolphins when they versed the Dolphins this year. So this is a good matchup for the defense as long as they can limit those long runs, as you said.
This will be the biggest test for the Steelers' run defense since, San Francisco?
Probably. The Steelers haven't really gone against a really good rushing team since then.
So time will tell. Where is that magic number at, do you think, for the defense? You think they can manage to give up only, say, 20 points, 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals, or do you think we're right around that 2.5 over-under for touchdowns?
I think that 2 touchdowns should be the max. I think that the Colts are going to score 20 in this game. So I think that I'm going to set the number at 20 because I think that anything more than that is a little bit too much with how the Colts offense is in this game, especially without T.Y. Hilton. If they had T.Y. Hilton, I'd give them a little bit more, but it's just the offense is running through backup wide receivers, the 2 tight ends, and they're pretty good running backs. I think that the Steelers' defense and how well they've played should keep them to 20. Now, the big issue I think for me here, though, is the turnovers. This is a really good matchup in a few ways. The Colts team versus the Pittsburgh Steelers is just a really it's a really good team. We talked about the pass rush versus their offensive line. Now, the defense is opportunistic while the Colts offense is stingy with turnovers. They only have 7 turnovers on the year in total, which is tied for 4th in the league. So it's going to be interesting there to see, because part of the reason the Steelers defense has been doing so well is they've been getting multiple turnovers in games and really limiting the other offense. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Steelers can who's going to win that battle? Whether the Colts' stingy offense is not going to turn over the ball, or the Steelers' opportunistic defense is going to be getting the turnovers here.
And on the other side of the ball, let's start looking at the Steelers' offense and the Colts' defense. Turnovers, not giving up the ball on offense, will really do a lot for the Steelers' defense in this game. And let's now turn the page here to the Steelers' offense and now the Colts' defense. So with Mason Rudolph back at the helm, obviously he's going to have a better start this week. And again, the Colts' defense, nothing really jumps out at you, and they could be missing 3 starters, 2 on the back end. But, we've got the problems at running back right now for the Steelers. So how do you think the Steelers match up? At least let's start with their offensive line, I guess. Let's just assume for now that Justin Houston's not going to be able to go. You got Margus Hunt, Danico Autry, Kamoko Toure, and Jabal Sheard as the front 4. That's not a really scary unit. I mean, Sheard has been a guy that's been a solid player in the past, but he's never been an elite player.
You know who I like? I like Autry. Danico Autry was playing well this year until he got hurt. And so if Houston doesn't go, that's the one guy you got to be able to contain, I think. So I'm not really scared of Sheard. Marcus Hunt played really well last year, but I feel like he hasn't played as well this year. If I'm just focusing in on anyone, I think Autry is the one you got to be stopping here. I think that he's actually a really good player, and injuries don't show it on. The injury hurt his stats, but I think he's a pretty solid pass rusher, actually. So he's another guy that the Steelers should look out for if Justin Houston's not playing.
The linebackers are obviously the big names here. They've got a couple standouts in Anthony Walker and, of course, last year's Defensive Rookie of the Year, Darius Leonard. Leonard returning from an injury recently. These linebackers are good, but one thing that I have noticed and that I've read up on is that they are a little over-aggressive in that they flow a little strongly. So this could be a game where you could incorporate some counter moves, some power, some misdirection runs that might be able to get the linebackers flowing once you've set it up early in the game. These guys can be beat because they are so aggressive, but of course they can wreck the game if you can't get them blocked.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Darius Leonard is still playing at a high level despite being injured a lot of this year with a concussion. I believe he had a calf injury, if I remember correctly, right after that. But like you said, you just got to attack them misdirections. Little things are going to be able to get the linebackers moving in the wrong direction, open up the middle of the field, and just pass on them. Anthony Walker's another guy that's a pretty solid pass rusher. He's not on the line, but I figured I should say that as well. So he's another guy that Steelers need to watch out for when he's coming into pass rush.
One thing that I think is nice about potentially over-aggressive linebackers, and I think this matches up well, it goes together like peanut butter and jelly, is having a more patient runner back there. We know James Conner is more of a hit-the-hole kind of guy, but Jalen Samuels is similar to the Le'Veon Bell type of runner where he'll sit and wait at the line for a little longer. So I think that might play into the Steelers' favor in having Samuels back this week. How many times do you think Samuels gets the ball? Because remember, other than the Patriots game last year, I don't think he's touched the ball more than 20 times in a game.
So we're just talking about how many times he's going to rush the ball or how many total touches, like rushes and catches?
How about both? But let's start with how many times are you going to run him?
I'm going to say they run him 15 times, or I'll say 16, just because it's one more than a nice even 15. So I'll say 16 times. I think that the Steelers use him a good amount here.
Then you think I have to assume he's going to be active in the pass game too.
I think he'll get 4 catches. I think 4 catches is outlandish for him. So I think he'll get like 4 catches for maybe we'll say it's not that big of a yardage. We'll say 28 yards.
Another thing that's notable with aggressive linebackers is that you can run play action off of that. And I think that if you're going to be running a lot of those power and counter, you're going to be seeing a lot more under center. And under center promotes more play action like that. So I think that means more Roosevelt Nix. And I think this could be a big game for the tight ends too. Again, you need to be able to get these guys to bite. And if you do, I think we could see a lot of Nick Vannett and Vance McDonald in this game. And I'm hoping to see that. But of course, with the injury to Pierre Desir and possibly Malik Hooker being out as well, and of course the threat of their best pass rusher possibly being on the bench with an injury, I think that this could be a big game for a guy like Deontay Johnson, because the Colts love to use bracket coverage similar to what the Patriots do, which means Juju Smith-Schuster could be a guy that they really try to take out of the game plan, which means it's going to be up to those tight ends. It's going to be up to James Washington. It's going to be up to Deontay Johnson to come up with these plays to win the game.
And I'm okay with that. I think that Deontay Johnson does have a pretty solid matchup here. Like you said, Pierre Desir has been out. He's actually played really well for the Colts since being with them. And I think that the wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 3s for Pittsburgh could really step up here and be able to help with Mason Rudolph's passing game here. I'm not as confident in the tight ends. The Colts have actually been really good at limiting tight ends like all this year, even when Darius Leonard was hurt. So I'm not optimistic about the tight ends going off, but I do think that Deontay Johnson's a guy that could step up. I've been waiting forever for James Washington to really have a game where he's like a factor in the passing attack. Like last game he was decent, but it was mostly because he laid some pretty solid blocks. In the passing game he wasn't that great. He only caught one catch on 6 targets, but I'm still waiting for him to go off. And then, I mean, maybe Dante Moncrief can have a sort of revenge game, even the team he played on before Pittsburgh. I don't know. Maybe Dante Moncrief can finally step up and make a catch or 2 in this game. But I do like the matchups with how banged up the Colts are.
Well, yeah, Rock, you said, I think I like Deontay Johnson a little more every week.
And Johnson's really developing very nicely. He's developing much more like Juju did than James Washington did in his first year. So, I mean, he's still in between. He's not going off like crazy, but he's a nice in-between where he's still doing solid so far.
One thing I will say about Washington is I am hopeful because the Steelers finally started throwing the ball further down the field, which is how you're going to get Washington more involved. So I was happy to see that, and I'm hopeful that I think that the breakout game or the performances that we'll see that are more improvements on what we've seen, I think those games are coming.
Sure hope so, because I thought when I looked at James Washington pre-draft, before that draft, I thought he was going to be the best wide receiver coming out of that draft. Obviously, before I even knew he was going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, I just thought I had a good feeling about him. I liked how he looked there. I thought that his issues at OSU weren't going to stand up at the NFL level, but so far I've been pretty wrong. But so I'm hoping that he turns it around and becomes great.
And like we said, a lot of it is the game plan, and if you continue to attack further down the field, that plays into his wheelhouse.
Yes, sir.
And last but not least, Dante Moncrief. I have to think this is his last week with the Steelers, and I think he knows it.
And he's got to ball out, try and get to another team, so I'm hoping he does good for that at least.
If the compensatory, equation didn't factor into this, there wouldn't really be a need to cut him, would there?
Oh, not at all. I think even though that he hasn't been good, he hasn't been detrimental to the team since week 1 and 2, where he dropped all those passes. So, he could have stayed, but, I mean, at the expense of the comp pick right now, it's just he's got to go. I mean, I wish that the team just made a replacement at wide receiver this weekend, but, I mean, there's no reason to cut him now. It could go straight to the last minute for the Steelers so they could use Moncrief for as long as they need to.
Yeah, it is kind of unfortunate, but it's the way the league is set up, and we'll see what happens after that. But just another failed experiment, if you will. I really didn't think it was going to happen this way, and I think if the Steelers still had Ben Roethlisberger and they had one more win under their, say if they won that game against the Ravens and they didn't trade all those draft picks away, I think it's possible the Steelers might have held on to him, but that extra draft capital would really come in handy, especially if it's a third-round compensatory selection. So I just think for a guy that's playing right now no more than 10 snaps a game, I think you have to do it.
100%. It's the difference between a 4th-round pick and a 3rd-round pick. That's a pretty big deal. At the expense of 10 snaps a game, they should sure as heck do that.
So the Colts have been a bend but don't break defense. I think explosive plays are really going to be important in this game, which is why a guy like James Washington is going to be so important if the deep ball can get connected with him. The Colts have been a good red zone team, and even though they're not statistically dominant, they've been a solid unit. So in terms of the overall look at this defense compared to the Steelers' offense, we talked about that magic number being around 20-21 for the Colts. Is that right around where it is for the Steelers too?
Yeah, I think so, because the Colts' defense is actually pretty solid here, so that I think that they are going to be able to put up around 21-20, but I think that's what the Steelers should be able to put up as well. So I think that both teams are going to be around like that 21-20 mark. So I think it's not too much to ask for 2 touchdowns. I think that 2 touchdowns is solid. I don't expect 3 because I think the Colts defense is a little bit better. Maybe if you tell me that Justin Houston, Malik Hooker aren't playing, I expect a little bit more. But I think at least one of them is going to be playing, so I'm factoring that in as well.
I think the Steelers' offense will have 4 opportunities to score, not including turnovers. I think that's how you can put it. And the question is, will you get 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns and a field goal, 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals, whatnot,
Yeah, the difference is the number here.
The number and, of course, the turnovers, but that's the case in all the games as well. Brief look at special teams. It's been a tumultuous year for the best kicker in NFL history and Adam Vinatieri in terms of overall legacy, but he righted the ship even after missing 2 kicks last week. He still nailed the game winner. I'd say they're not out of the woods with him yet, but he's still doing his thing.
Yeah, so that's something to monitor. We'll have to see. It's obviously harder to kick in Heinz Field, so we'll see if he struggles here on any field goals or extra points they attempt. He's missed, I believe, 3 extra points so far this year. I know he was thinking about retiring early on after one of his really bad games, like week 1 or 2, but he obviously hasn't fixed it all. He did okay since then, but then he missed an extra point and field goal last week, so watch out for that.
Yeah, weeks 3 through 8 were solid, but then last week and the first 2 weeks weren't good. So, hey guys, no worries. Colts fans, we understand your pain. We were there last year.
Yeah, dude. We were there.
So
for sure.
I think we're about set on this game. It should be a close one. I think it really will be.
I think it is going to be close.
All right, let's take a look at the rest of the league in this is week 10 now. My goodness. I can't believe it. Week 10 already?
How time flies.
And it started off with a relatively entertaining Thursday night game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Arizona Cardinals. A late, long touchdown. Did you finally get a chance to see that throw by Kyler Murray, how he just dropped it in the bucket? What a beautiful throw.
It did. It was a great throw.
So the final score of that one read, 28-25. So the Niners didn't end up covering that spread. It was that late Cardinals touchdown and 2-pointer that was the difference. Kenyon Drake coming out in a big way, having almost his entire, what felt like he nearly compiled all of his stats with the Dolphins in one game with the Cardinals. He went off.
That was insane. I mean, they even decided to cut Alfred Morris after that game, and they're like, yeah, Kenyon Drake's good enough. That's all we need. So he did really well, and I guess I should apologize. I really didn't think Kenyon Drake was that good. I didn't think it was just because he was in a bad system or in a bad cast around him. He performed well with the Cardinals' offensive line against the 49ers' defense. Granted, Quan Alexander left after the second play of the game, but the rest of the 49ers' defense. So shout out to him. I feel like I owe him an apology.
One thing I will say in defense of you, though, is that sometimes players will, maybe they're stuck in a rut or something, and the light won't go off for them until they're traded, and they're like, wow, maybe this is one less chance I have in this league. So maybe that's something that got to him.
Maybe.
All right, so the 49ers improved to 8-0 on the season, and let's get into Sunday's games. We got an early game, 9:30 a.m. It's the London game. I think it's the last one of the season. It's going to be the Texans with the Jaguars hosting, technically, the annual Jaguars game. An interesting game. Houston's getting... sorry, I'm looking at the wrong line. Of course, for some reason, ESPN and Pigskin Pick'em are different. Houston's getting 2.5 on the road, according to Pigskin Pick'em, so Jacksonville's 2.5-point dogs in London. I'm going to just come right out and say it. I was originally thinking Texans, but the Jaguars just played different in London.
I actually agree with you that they play different. And I was thinking that because I remember when they played the
Ravens?
Baltimore Ravens,
Yep.
and absolutely thrashed them. But I'm still going to pick the Texans as a cover. I'm going to hope that thing where the Jaguars just become super powerful in London doesn't happen. I'm going to still pick the Texans to cover here.
Give me the Jaguars in an upset. If this was not in London, if this were in Jacksonville, I'd take the Texans, as weird as that sounds. All right.
I understand.
A game I'll be attending, the Washington Redskins, Dwayne Haskins getting his first start in Buffalo, and the Bills coming off a disappointing loss to the Eagles, could be looking for some revenge. Redskins are 9.5-point dogs on the road. Where are you leaning here?
I'm going to pick the Redskins plus 9.5. I thought that the Bills came out really slow against the Dolphins, and I do think the Redskins are a slightly better team. So I'm going to say that the Redskins plus 9.5. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. What was I saying? Just Redskins plus 9.5. I think they could keep it close.
It's just hard for me to envision right now the Bills' offense. I know that they're getting Devin Singletary back, but it's not a high-powered offense at all. And until I see that offense come alive, it would first of all have to come against a team that's not as good like the Redskins. But until then, this is too big a line just because I don't know if I can trust the Bills to surpass 21 or 24 points.
I think that's fair. I just think that I was surprised by the Dolphins being able to score that much on the Bills 2 weeks ago, so I'm going to still roll with Redskins plus 9.5.
I'm going to factor that into the Bills coming off the bye week. But regardless of the fact the Bills, I have a feeling, are going to win, but give me the Redskins to keep it within 9 points here. Let's head to the next game, an NFC showdown, a rematch of a playoff game last year. Both the combined record of these two teams is a losing record of 7-8, so watch that. The Bears in Philadelphia. Both teams desperately need a win. The Bears backsliding here. You got Mitchell Trubisky and the pop gun offense of the Bears against the Philadelphia Eagles and a disgracefully bad secondary. Eagles laying 4.5. I'll take the Eagles, cover that. I just don't believe in Mitchell Trubisky whatsoever. And that offense, Matt Nagy, after being the coach of the year last year, low-key has not been a good coach this year.
I agree, and I'm going to pick the Eagles to cover as well. I just don't think the Bears can do it. Their defense hasn't played at a high enough level to carry their offense this year because their offense is way worse than it was last year. It's just, I'm going to pick the Eagles to cover here.
Tennessee Titans at the Carolina Panthers. Kyle Allen coming off his first career loss. They're getting 3.5 at home against Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to go with what Steeler Nation should be rooting for, and that should be for a big win for the Panthers. I think they win by about 10 points. You want to see some of these AFC teams starting to bite the dust if the Steelers are, because if the Patriots lose to the Ravens on Sunday, you can kiss the AFC North goodbye.
Yeah, that would be really, really tough. I'm going to also pick the Panthers to cover here. I think that they're the way better team. I feel like this line should have been a little bit more. I feel like it should have been Carolina -5 for anyone to really not pick them. So I'm going to pick the Panthers to cover.
Minnesota Vikings at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs still only have one home at Arrowhead. They're in danger of falling to, I think, 1-4 at home. The status of Patrick Mahomes is still uncertain, but with that being the case, the Chiefs are getting 2.5. I picked them to win in my official bet this week, so I'm hoping that Mahomes plays because this would be huge. So give me the Chiefs to win and cover.
I'm going to pick the Vikings plus 2.5 to be different. I really think I still don't like Kirk Cousins. I don't care how much better he's played. I still want to pick against the Vikings. I'm gonna root for them here. I think that they could beat the Matt Moore-led Chiefs. If Patrick Mahomes plays, I'm screwed for my pick. But I'm gonna pick Vikings plus 2.5.
Tank Bowl Part 2. We have the New York Jets at 1-6 playing the Miami Dolphins at 0-7. Austin, a 5.5-point spread. The Dolphins are home underdogs. Give me the Dolphins to win this one straight up.
I will also pick the Dolphins plus 5.5. I'm not sure they're going to win, but I think that they could keep it within 5.5 for the Jets because the Jets are bad and they should feel bad.
We got a sneaky good game out on the West Coast. Two teams sort of, I wouldn't call it must win, but it's pretty darn close to a must win for both teams. The Detroit Lions at 3-1. They're giving 2.5 to the Raiders at home. in Oakland. This will be the first time this year the Raiders will play without that baseball field on their stadium because remember, they haven't been home in a long, long time. I like the Lions in this one. I know their defense has been suspect lately, but I think the Lions are a quality team, and we already talked about how their losses haven't been great. I think this could be a high-scoring affair between the Lions and Raiders.
Could be a shootout, but I also like the Lions in this game. They're getting Darius Slay back for this game, so I'm going to pick Lions plus 2.5.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle's at home getting 6.5. This is just a game I wanted when I was at the sports book last night. I wanted to take the Buccaneers because of the line, but I can't trust Jameis Winston's turnover bakery, my man. Is it going to be open? Betting on quarterbacks that are prone to turning the football over is usually not a good way to go about your business.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think that Jameis Winston's just not a good quarterback, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with what the Bucs do after this season and what they do in the offseason in terms of quarterback. I'm going to pick the Seattle Seahawks to cover here and beat that 6.5-point spread. I don't think the Bucs are that good.
The free-falling Cleveland Browns at 2-5, playing in Denver. Denver's only 2-6, but they're yielding 2.5 to the Browns here. Brandon Allen will take his first regular season snaps as a starter with Joe Flacco out for the season and Drew Lock having not returned from injury yet. All signs say Cleveland, but Cleveland has been an absolute mess. I would not touch this game if I were you, personally. But I'll take the Browns to cover. I don't feel good about it at all.
I'm going to take the Browns to cover, too. I just don't trust in Brandon Allen. I mean, if Brandon Allen goes down and Brett Rippon plays, I actually think I would have picked the Broncos plus the points. But they're saying Brandon Allen's the starter, and they just promoted Rippon from the practice squad. So I liked him. He was a guy I looked at pre-draft. So I do not like Brandon Allen. I'm going to pick the Browns to cover.
Green Bay Packers traveling to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. You thought you saw Heinz Field West a few weeks ago. Get ready for Lambeau Field West. The Packers getting 3.5 on the road in their Western Stadium, and I think they're going to lay a beat down on the Chargers, who are just in rough shape right now.
This line kind of confused me. The Chargers don't have a home game, so they shouldn't really get a home field line. They should get help with their line because they're at home. It doesn't make a difference for them. So I don't know. I think I would have taken this line at -8 for Green Bay. So I'm gonna pick the Packers to beat the 3.5 point by a good margin.
The Sunday night game, we got a good one. The New England Patriots, looking to push their record to 9-0, will face their stingiest test yet in a Baltimore Ravens team that always gives the Patriots fits. And this will be the first time the Patriots and Bill Belichick have seen Lamar Jackson. So you take that into consideration, plus the fact the Ravens are home and they've had the extra week to prepare. Only a 3.5-point spread. Give me the Ravens to win this one straight up, Austin. I think, I'm not a big Lamar Jackson guy, but I think that extra week is going to be huge for the Ravens, and this will be the first big true test for New England, and I think John Harbaugh will have a few trick plays up his sleeve that give the Baltimore Ravens a win, and as we said, the AFC North, you can say goodbye to that, and the Patriots will get their first loss on the season.
Some bold words there. I'm still going to pick New England to cover here. Seattle disappointed me last week, but I don't think the Patriots are going to do it this week. I think New England covers, not big, but I do think they just barely squeak out a win here.
NFC East showdown on Monday Night Football. Daniel Jones and the G-Men host Dak Prescott and the Cowboys to a 7.5-point spread in favor of the Cowboys. I like the Cowboys to win, but I like the Giants to cover the spread. So give me the Giants plus 7.5.
I agree with you there. I'm picking the Giants plus 7.5 as well. I think that the Giants are going to keep it within those points. So that's what I got.
Alrighty then. Let's move on to NFL news to talk about. I don't remember if we had discussed this before, but defensive end for the Houston Texans, J.J. Watt, he suffered a torn pec and he's done for the year. Any questions for you regarding possibly him calling it quits after the third injury in 4 years?
I don't think so. I think that J.J. Watson's going to come back like he always does to quit. Yeah, and he's still playing at a high level. Even pectorals, I feel like, are even so I think that he'll be fine. I think he's going to come back and play next year.
Quan Alexander with the same type of injury, no real concern there. I think he should be okay for next year.
Yeah, Quan Alexander should be ready for next year, but I mean, it sucks for the 49ers defense. It's a big blow to the middle of them.
Green Bay Packers edge rusher Zadarius Smith has been cited for speeding and possession of marijuana. According to the legal documents filed in Wisconsin, the incident actually occurred on September 29th, so that's over a month ago. A hearing was scheduled for next Thursday. The league and the team are obviously aware of the incident. Any thoughts on that?
No, not really. I mean, just stay off the weed.
The Denver Broncos, we already talked about it. They placed Joe Flacco on injured reserve. He's done for the year. And with Flacco set to make $20.25 million in 2020, none of it is guaranteed, so I have to think that he's played his last down as a Denver Bronco.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I can't see the Broncos going forward with him. I mean, they got Drew Lock waiting, almost ready to come back from his injury. I think that they're going to roll with Lock and maybe draft another wide receiver, bring in a veteran wide receiver next year that's way cheaper, probably like a journeyman or something. Some guy that's not going to cost them $20 million a year.
Do you think Joe Flacco ends up somewhere else, or do you think he decides to hang it up?
I think Flacco will end up somewhere else. I feel like he could end up with like the Buccaneers. He could end up with the Titans, even though the Titans have Tannehill now. There's a few teams he could end up with, and if he takes a pay cut, he could definitely end up like somewhere like maybe he could end up in New England. If you wanted to be, that would have to be a really significant pay cut, but you know.
I think he's still got a year or two or a couple more stops left in him.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
The Seattle Seahawks have claimed wide receiver Josh Gordon off of waivers from the New England Patriots after they cut him this week. I know you were gunning for him, but it looks like he's going to be, I don't know how much he'll play on Sunday, but I have to think he's going to at least get some decent action.
Yeah, there were questions about his work ethic, so I wasn't as mad when it happened. And obviously, 27 other teams did not put in for him. Seattle Seahawks were the 28th team on the waiver priority. So there's a reason why that many teams went for it, because tons of teams need a wide receiver, not just the Steelers. So there's obviously something wrong there. So I don't feel as bad about it. I still think it's an improvement for Seattle, because now they got DK Metcalf, they got Tyler Lockett, and now Josh Gordon. But I'm not super mad. I know that the Steelers could get someone else if they need to. Not as what I thought of as Josh Gordon, but when they cut Moncrief, I'm sure they'll get another wide receiver that's just chilling on free agency.
Eli Rogers?
Eli Rogers, yeah. Eli Rogers is dope.
Well, remember, it's just usually teams will shy away from players the Patriots cut sometimes because it's like, why did they cut him, you know?
Yeah, there's a good point there as well. I don't know. I do, if there was questions about his work ethic, I don't think he would be better than Moncrief. I heard he's got drop problems as well this year. Haven't really watched, but, you know.
He's definitely not the same player he was 5 years ago. He's just, I really, other than that game against the Colts and a handful of games the last couple of years, he really hasn't impressed me that much.
Not really.
I mean, he had a touchdown against the Steelers where he was completely uncovered. Like, congratulations. A lot of people can score when they're not covered. Some breaking news, actually. This could be why the Patriots released Josh Gordon. They're activating rookie wide receiver N'Keal Harry off of injured reserve.
Oh, cool. Good for them. I looked at Harry. I didn't really like him that much for the Steelers. I wasn't a big fan of his, but, I mean, maybe he'll be great for the Patriots, which would suck. Actually, okay, yeah, so I take that back. I hope that he's not good.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't he a player similar to the mold of a Martavis Bryant kind of guy?
No.
No?
He was more like a Juju.
Oh, okay. Alrighty then. I was going to say I do not remember, so that works for me. Did you look at Andy Isabella, too? Hello?
No? I feel like no, but the problem is when I look at so J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Andy Isabella, I don't know why, but they remind me of each other. I looked at Whiteside, but I don't think I looked at Andy Isabella. I thought, for some reason, I thought you did.
I might have. I feel like one of us did, and for some reason I just don't remember.
He's in one of our mock drafts, apparently, but apparently neither of us had him there.
That might be why. Okay. Last bit of NFL news. I'm sure you saw by now. I think this is overblown just because stuff like this always is, but because it's the Browns and because it's Baker Mayfield, it's national news that he got frustrated with a Browns reporter who's constantly been a thorn in his side and has been kind of a nuisance for him with the way that he acts around him. And, like, I don't know if you know much about, I forget his name. His name is Tony something, I think. You know who I'm talking about?
And I know the reporter. It's Tony Grossi.
Tony Grossi, that's his name. He was apparently he was bagging on Baker Mayfield during the draft because he asked teams to fly him out in first class or something, which, I mean, you know, to team facilities, which, I mean, shouldn't they be doing that anyways? But, I mean, whatever. Regardless, Mayfield already doesn't care for this guy, and then Tony asked him a question at a press conference this week, and Baker Mayfield stormed out of the press conference. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I think it's a little overblown, but at the same time, I just think that I know you're frustrated, but you can't handle it that way because look at what it's done now.
He started a whole media storm, even if it's undeserved and it was, like, stupid. He started a whole media storm because of it. So, I mean, you kind of love to see it as a Steelers fan, but, like, it is really stupid. I don't know.
Alrighty, let's move on to Steelers Colts. We'll cover X Factors, bold predictions. So I wanted to do something different. So I know we had been alternating in terms of the draft, if you will, but I was thinking that maybe we could do like a trivia question. And if you get it right, I'll have you can decide if you want to pick your X Factors first or second and then have the back-to-back. So does that sound good to you?
It's good to me.
You can ask me a question next week if you want, but if you're ready, I'll ask it to you. Who is the... How do I want to word this? Who scored the last points for the Pittsburgh Steelers in a Super Bowl game?
Super Bowl game?
Yeah, who's the last player to score points? So this could include kickers, by the way.
Oh, Lord. Is it Suishun?
No, sir. No, sir. It was Antoine Randall L., my favorite player. The Steelers had scored a touchdown to make it 28-25 in Super Bowl, 28-23 in Super Bowl 45, and then the Steelers ran a read option pitch to Antoine Randall L., who took it in for the 2-point conversion, which obviously was the last points the Steelers scored in that game, and they haven't been back since. So the answer is Antoine Randall L. So with that being the case, I now have the decision of whether I want to go first or second. So I'm going to go first with my X Factor. My top X Factor is going to be on offense, and it's going to be Deontay Johnson. Look, Deontay Johnson likely going to be going up against a guy in Rock Ya-Sin. We talked about him earlier today. Rock Ya-Sin has struggled a lot with being grabby, and we've seen Deontay Johnson get targeted all over the field. He's caught breaking routes, he's caught deep passes, he's caught short routes. I really like what I've seen from him the last few weeks, and I think he's continuing to get better. I think with the way the Colts use their bracket coverage to take out the top receiving threat, I think this could be a huge game for Deontay Johnson. And with that being the case, I'm going to predict a 150-yard performance and 2 touchdowns from Deontay Johnson. That's my first X Factor and my bold prediction. So let's hear both of your X Factors, and then if you have your bold predictions up yet, you can either bide more time when I say my next X Factor, or you can just jump right in.
So my X Factors, I'm going to pick Dante Moncrief. I do think that he'll finally have a decent game and possibly his last game with the Steelers. He's got to put on an audition for another team more than likely. So regardless, he's got to audition for next year for sure. There's no way, even if the Steelers keep him to the end of this year, I can't see them keeping him for next year. He's a cap casualty, and that's like $4.5 million that the Steelers could use somewhere else. So I'm going to pick Dante Moncrief to put on a show in this probable last game with the Steelers. Then my defensive one, I'm going to pick Devin Bush. I think that Bush is going to be matched up on the tight ends a lot, or at least Ebron a lot, and I think that's going to be a big part of the Colts offense is trying to get Ebron open. So I'm going to pick Devin Bush as my defense. So now my bold predictions, Moncrief is going to have 3 catches, at least 3 catches, for 80 yards. And that's not really the boldest in the world. For Moncrief, I think it is. So that's the first one. And then my second bold prediction is that Devin Bush has 15 tackles in this game. I think Devin Bush is going to go nuts. That's a lot of tackles to get in the game. So that's my second one. What is your last X factor and bold prediction?
My last X factor is going to be T.J. Watt. We talked about him briefly when we were talking about the Colts' really good offensive line, and that if anyone has a favorable matchup in this game, it's going to be T.J. Watt. And Brendan Smith is not the worst offensive lineman by far in the league, but he's the guy that if you can beat someone consistently in this game, it's going to be him, and you have to like the fact that T.J. Watt, the Steelers' best pass rusher, is going to be matched up against him. So I think T.J. Watt, if anyone's going to make an impact in this game from a pass rushing standpoint consistently, it's going to be him. And then my bold prediction for him, I think he comes up with 2.5 sacks on the game and forces and recovers a fumble, so he forces a huge turnover in this game. So give me T.J. Watt as my defensive X factor, and for my bold prediction, he finishes with 2.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So that wraps up our bold predictions and X Factor segment. So on the whole, the 5-2 Colts at the 3-4 Steelers. I'm not going to be able to see this game, unfortunately, because I'll be in Buffalo, but I'll obviously be trying to pay attention. Where are you leaning on this game? How are you feeling? I have to think this is going to be a close game based on the way we've kind of outlined things here.
Indianapolis is favored by 1.5 points in this game. I'm going to say this game goes to overtime. I think it's going to be 20-20. Going into overtime, exactly where we both said both these teams are. I mean, like you look at like the stats, what the stats say. So you just look at the points per game for the Colts on offense is 22.6, and then their points per game allowed by their defense is 21.6. Then you look at the Steelers' offense, it's 21.4 for points per game, and then you look at their defense, and they allow 20.7. So both these teams are like right there. So I think this game is going to go into overtime, 20-20, and then the Steelers win 23-20. I think the Steelers are going to be able to pull it out just barely, squeak past the Colts in overtime. What do you got here?
You know the Colts have played in one-score games in every game this year?
About the one-score game meaning what?
Meaning no more than a touchdown. Like they lost to the Chargers by 6. They beat the Titans by 2.
Wasn't the Raiders like a 14-point?
They lost 31. They lost 31-24.
I thought they lost by more that game.
That's because it was like 28-7 for a while.
And yeah, they got that garbage time touchdown to Eric Ebron on 4th down.
So yeah, that one really wasn't a one-score game per se, but every game they've played in has been a one-score game this year. So they're 5-2 in one-score games. We know that the Steelers haven't been as great in one-score games this year. You think about the Ravens game, the Niners game. You look at their losses, with the exception of the Patriots game, they've lost one-score games. The only one-score game that they won this year was the Chargers game, and that was a game that was 24-0 for a good while. So I hope I'm wrong, but I just have a feeling that the Colts a little bit better. I think they're a little better coached, and they're a little more cohesive. I think the Colts are going to win this one thanks to a last-minute turnover by the Steelers offense, and the Colts are going to be able to take it in for the game-winning touchdown. Give me the Colts to win 24-23 in a heartbreaking loss for the Steelers as the Colts continue to win a close one-score game while the Colts win the one-score game. So I'll take the Steelers to cover that 1.5-point spread. But that being said, I'll have the Colts improving to 6-2 with the Steelers dropping to 3-4 or 3-5. And I hope I'm wrong, but that's where I am going in this one. So a Steelers win would obviously be huge. I think we'll learn a lot about Mason Rudolph in this game, and I know we've said that for a while, but I think this is going to be a really good test for him.
It is. I mean, we're going to see some more mental resistance, see if he could start this game a little bit stronger than he did last game. It's a tougher matchup here than it was last game, so it'll be good to see what he can do here.
Alrighty then. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up? Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions about the Steelers or about the show, please email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com, and you can see all of our episodes on our YouTube channel, and you can also see our new episodes on SoundCloud as well. So thank you so much for joining again, as always. And Austin, thank you. It's good to hear you. Good to talk to you after a wild day yesterday. And hopefully, even though I won't be able to watch the game, hopefully I'll be able to watch some good highlights when I'm on the way home.
Yeah, man, hopefully. Have fun at the Redskins-Bills game.
I'll try to. It's going to be cold, which, Western New York weather is always something else. It was on Monday, it was like 60-something degrees, and now yesterday it was in the low 30s.
Nice, man. Already freezing. Great.
Can't wait. All right. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Enjoy the games on Sunday and on Monday. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.